All right, welcome to today's episode of Your Daily Scrum. I'm professional Scrum trainer Ryan Ripley. With me is professional Scrum trainer Todd Miller. This is the show where we address your questions about Scrum. We help you get a little better. We want to level you and your teams up so that you can go forth and do great things with the Scrum framework. Todd, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Still under these snow conditions.
Still snowing. It's like Groundhog's Day, right?
Mm-hmm. Great movie, by the way. Great movie. I think I've already mentioned that before on this show. Movie with Bill Murray, Groundhog Day. Fantastic.
It is a classic.
Yeah.
Todd, we have another viewer question. We should check this one out.
We do. So somebody had mentioned and asked, what are the pros and cons of capacity-based sprint planning versus velocity-based sprint planning?
Todd, can you kind of give some background on this? Some of these terms I'm familiar with, but it's been a long time since I read a particular book that I think this is based on.
Yeah. I think it might be based on Agile Estimating and Forecasting by Mike Cohn. And I think in there, just so please don't hold me to that book reference. I'm just pulling that out of my head. But I know that there were, back in the day, there were two different schools of thought for how you sprint plan. One is by capacity, meaning you put hours and tasks and you plan based off of hours and tasks. And the other one was off of velocity, which you plan based off of oftentimes the story points of you had finished in previous sprints, right? So whatever the average was, 30 story points, that's what you bring into the sprint. So velocity versus capacity sprint planning. And this person's kind of asking the pros and cons of choosing one or the other.
Yeah, you know what? For me, Todd, this is a weird question because I think velocity and capacity are the same thing.
Yeah.
And so people get really up in arms about that. No, velocity is so much different. And capacity. Look, send two developers on vacation for a sprint and tell me what happens to your velocity.
Yeah.
All right. And so I think this capacity versus velocity. Now, if people are asking, should we do hours and stuff on tasks? My answer is no. Like, leave the devs alone. Let them plan their own work. So if that's kind of the debate, then my answer would be capacity is silly. Velocity is less silly, but still silly. We've kind of moved into the flow metrics forecasting space, you know?
Yeah. I think it's really worth reading up on that. We can't be bigger proponents of Dan Vacante's book, When Will It Be Done?
Yeah.
I think the alternatives here help to curb some of the bad behavior that some of these metrics have caused in organizations.
Yeah.
But the reality is a lot of people are still using velocity and capacity.
Yeah. And let's mash that together. Let's just say velocity. Look, this is really just velocity planning, and it's fine. It's got two really good uses. It can help a Scrum team figure out what could possibly fit in a sprint, and it can help a product owner perhaps forecast out some work, right? But other than that, you don't compare teams. You don't try to increase velocity. You don't try to improve velocity. Velocity is not the point. Delivering value is the point. And so if we stay away from some of these weird uses of velocity, it's probably all right to still use it. But just keep in mind, it's only really half the picture. It doesn't cover anything of value, right?
Well, and this has me thinking and poking holes in all of this. If that's exclusively what we're planning on, either velocity or the hours, whatever you want to, if that's all we're planning on, what happens if you change your definition of done in the retrospective?
Yeah.
What happens if you are committed to improving something that's going to substantially change the way that your team works? Isn't that crazy to use capacity or velocity then?
Oh, I think it would be.
Right. So then I would say that if we're strictly using capacity or velocity, then we are in effect, as inputs into sprint planning, that's all we're planning based. We are in effect limiting our team's ability to improve.
Oh, absolutely. But we've thought that for years. And we cover some of this in the book where, we've really, the flow metrics, I think, tell us a lot about our processes, our practices, our value. Velocity is fine. Yeah. You have options. Capacity, if that's ours, let's get away from it.
Yeah, and I think our overall, I think the key point to this is that they're okay considerations, but they're not alone, right? You must consider your definition of done, what retrospective items, what's happening in the product backlog, right? These are all factors that go as to inputs into sprint planning. Don't just hitch yourself to one of these wagons.
Todd, if people spend as much time arguing over estimates, if they would spend as much time collaborating with customers and stakeholders as they do arguing these topics, I think we'd have a lot better products out in the market.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
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 But good luck. It's a great question. We want teams planning well. Velocity is certainly one way to go. We think you have options. Check out When Will It Be Done by Dan Vacanti. We think that's a great option as well. But whatever you choose, make sure that you're aligned with your stakeholders and that you're putting value out there into the world and that the impediments are removed and that the teams are healthy, right?
Yeah.
All right. Great question. We appreciate it. If you have a question for us, leave it in the comments below. As you can see from the recent videos, we are catching up on the backlog of questions. Hey, if you put it in the comments, we're probably going to answer it, right?
Yeah, we've been talking. We're going to try to make that backlog transparent at some point because it is growing, and we're trying to order it by the questions that you're asking. But then we'd be kind of remiss and not eating our own dog food if we did that. So the questions that we're kind of ordering it by are the questions that we commonly get answered or are asked. So maybe in the future we'll think about a way that we can do that.
All right, everybody. Thanks for checking out today's edition of Your Daily Scrum. Hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the like. Smash those buttons, right, Todd? Smash them.
Smash them. You know it.
Check out the socials. And yeah, thanks for being here. We're glad you're getting something out of this. Leave us your comments. We love reading them. We'll try to address any question that comes in. And guess what? We'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye, everybody.